What's up, guys? All right. So we are going to get into the discussion here in a minute with the crew, with the guys. But I want to see. Thanks, Judah. I appreciate you, dude. Hey, this one's an interesting one tonight, Judah. I'm going to be honest, man. This one is an interesting one. We had some texts going back and forth. Brian, I don't know if you got to listen, how far you guys got in the book, but it's an interesting one because we had a lot of disagreements with the book on parts of this one. And so we even got a bit fired up about it, which was kind of fun. And so we're going to see how this goes in the discussion. And we're just going to be kind of open and honest about it. And that's kind of the goal of this, is to be open and honest about where we feel like the writer's right, where they feel like he may be off, but then also to what kind of God's showing us in this. And so we're going to talk about some real things and some ways that we're strong, ways that we're weak, and ultimately what it means to be a man in God's eyes. And it's going to be a good discussion. It's going to be a good discussion. Oh, the Matrix, my friend, the Matrix, the Matrix. All right, so let me pull in the guy. What's up, Corey? Gosh, it's so nice to see you. I guess I should come look at your face now that you just reconnected there on a sub there. All right. So these are the guys, again, that we do this Bible study with each and every week. And so this is the crew that lets us know where I'm right and where I'm wrong every time, right? Isn't that typically how this goes?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Mainly when you're wrong.
Okay, good. Okay, so again, kind of to preface where we're starting is this is the book we're reading, Becoming a King, A Path to Restoring the Heart of a Man. And the idea behind this book is that manhood, that men have been lost to culture and to society, and it's a part of reclaiming that. And I think, and we're going to kind of break into some of what it means. By the way, I spilled some water on my shirt just like literally 45 seconds ago, right before I walked in the room, and now I'm really subconscious of it. So just try to ignore that there. It's a downside of a nice quality camera. You can see it. But one of the things that is talked about in the book and then is talked about throughout the chapters is this idea that men have gone away, that you can't find men like you used to. So before we jump into the chapters, how do you guys feel about that statement? Do you feel like that culture and society has taken away what it means to be a man, changed it? Like, do you think that's an issue?
I think there's pieces of it that are definitely issues in today's culture. I think reading through this book, some of the things that related to me in a more modern perspective, or I guess maybe a cultural setting, or whatever. I think we don't take on the like provisioning and protecting type of role as often as we could. I know just in general, leadership qualities in myself are not present as much as they should be. And part of that is just because it's easy, I think, easier now than maybe 20, 30 years ago to not do that and be able to survive and not really notice an impact for a very long time. Back, 20, 30 years ago, of course, probably maybe longer than that, like you had to, or your family suffers.
Yeah, that's good. That's good insight. What about you, Ryan, Corey?
Restate your question one more time.
Yeah. Do you feel like, and
correctly.
Brian, feel free to jump into this. Judah, even feel free to jump into this. But do you feel like that in general, that there are less men, and not men like biologically born men, but what we would consider to be a man? Do you think that has been attacked or diminished by culture and society in today's world? Azrael, man, you can jump into this conversation. We just started, man. The conversation we're having and the question I just asked is, do you feel like that society and culture has diminished what it means to be a man, has kind of changed the target, has Man, the way that they describe it in the book is really good. So I'm going to say it. Castrated what it means to be a man,
Yikes.
which just me, or even just like cut the legs out from under him. Do you feel that way? So feel free to type in the chat what you feel. But Ryan, Corey, what do you guys feel?
I struggle with it a little bit.
And we'll talk about what
Because-
it means to be a man in a minute. So sorry,
Right.
don't feel like you have to go through
No,
that
yeah.
part of it.
No, I'm not. So yes and no would be my answer. Like I feel like men have been kind of taught to a negative degree that you cannot show emotion, you cannot be like all these things that a man can't do. That's not masculine, quote unquote masculine, you know? And I feel like there is in society a recognition, a better recognition of that now, and a lot of people trying to say, okay, what does it really look like to be masculine? Like you can be emotional and masculine, you can be caring and masculine, you can be, you know, what some would consider soft or whatever. Like that's not a negative thing. And I think there's that side of it, which is good, I feel like, but I do feel like that can also be used as kind of a cop out. Like, well, I'm not going to take my responsibilities. I'm not going to, you know, take my leadership role. I'm not going to do these things because, you know, that's not what a man is, you know, just what a man is. But so I feel like it goes both ways right now. I feel like we're kind of in this place where we're still trying to figure it out. Yeah, I think if I generalize it as like a whole, like I'd say, it's like when you're trying to practice like a golf swing or something, and you're like trying to correct something in your golf swing. You're really gonna like overcorrect initially, and then eventually you settle into like what the thing is. I feel like we're in an overcorrection period, but I feel like there is a balance that needs to be corrected, but maybe it's just a little bit overcorrected today.
That's a really good analogy. I like that. I might steal that sometime. How about you, Corey? You got anything to add to that?
Well, what I was gonna say is stir fry. What he said is exactly what I think too.
So read it
I don't know,
because they can't see
there-
it on the stream.
What's that? Oh,
Read it. Read what he said.
Yeah, Stir Fry said, I think society criticizes men for wanting to protect and provide as belittling to insulting to their spouses, which I agree. You know, if you try to be like, you know, I want my wife to be a stay-at-home wife and take, you know, be the best mom that she can to our kids, which isn't my situation, by the way, what I'm just saying in general. That looks as, you know, well, I don't think the woman should be able to do anything. That's not what we're saying. You know, and I don't know, there's a lot of ebbs and flows and things changes with society as to what's considered masculine, what you can or can't do, and then there's this whole toxic masculinity discussion. I don't know. It's I don't know. It's going to be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think in general, yes. I think that society and culture has almost made you feel embarrassed to be a man, and made you feel like you should be, and that you should be ashamed of wanting to do the things that men do. And we'll talk about what that means a little bit later. So stay with us. Don't jump out of here too early, because I think it's important to define what that is, and that when we define what that is and how it should look, from a godly perspective, not a worldly perspective, I think that you'll see that society has pushed against that, but that ultimately it's what we're called to do. So I think that I think that that's one of the ways, as Ezra says, that I think Satan has diminished the value and the call to be a man. I was listening to a really good pastor, which I'll talk about here in a little while, Joby Martin, talk about, he has a series called Act Like Men, and he talks about one of the greatest disservices that we've done to men. And this was, as it's in culture today, but it's really started as far back as Adam and Eve. It's this passivity, and it's this sense to not take the leadership role that God's given us and the leadership that God's appointed to us. And by being passive, we're actually hurting the people around us. And so but if we don't know what to do to be a man, then if we do the wrong things, then it ends up hurting the people around us as well. And if we do it in the wrong way, then it ends up hurting the people around us as well. We talked last week about how that God has given us all kingdoms, and that with that power and that authority that He's kind of put on us and kind of on our shoulders, we can either do well with that or we can do bad with that, and we can abuse that authority and abuse that power in a way that's harmful to the people around us, rather than doing it in a way that's fluid, or that's I was reading Brian's text, that's in a loving and serving kind of way. So Brian says, I think with gender fluidity, the role of men gets pushed into the closet. Yeah. And Jude, I think you're exactly right that people, and I don't think it's just your age, but I agree. I think it has been carried through, that they no longer take responsibility and put blame on someone else. Yeah. And Asheville, this is kind of what we're going to talk about, that you, so he says, sadly, a lot of us, including me, has not grown up with a father, so I wasn't shown to be a man or to lead my family, and that is something I had to figure out, and I'm still figuring out. I think the encouraging thing is that you don't have to have had a great dad to know where to go, because the Bible gives us that, and God is ultimately the best father that we can look to. And as we talked about last week, that sometimes the challenge is seeing ourselves as God's son, but that through our faith in Christ, we've been restored, we've been adopted into the family as children of God. And so that we can look to God as our example. We can look to God as the voice that gives us direction. So as we kind of start with that, chapter 4, we're doing 4, 5, and 6 tonight. Chapter 4 was becoming the man you were born to be. So the chapter is a little bit different places. Like this had I think this was the White Stone chapter. Is that what this one was? And the Matrix and all this sort of stuff. It was a bit all over the place. Yeah, Gladiator. That's right. It was a bit all
to books and movies.
Yeah, a lot of stuff on this one. So what are some things that stuck out to you guys in chapter 4? I know there may not be a ton in chapter 4, but what are some things that stuck out to you guys? And I'll start first while y'all look. For me, on page 49, where he says, the critical idea we must not miss is, in order for us to become who God meant when He meant us, we must seek to encounter God, and we must engage in the slow and steady process of apprenticeship. Something kind of he talked about throughout this whole chapter was we have to encounter God, which we'll talk about in the next chapter as part of becoming a man. And then we have to understand that it's a slow and steady process. I think that the Western culture and just in general, the technology culture has made us want to be microwave Christians and microwave dads, and drive through people to where we can do something and we're instantly ready, and we're instantly to the point that we need to be at. When the reality is, becoming a godly man is no different than working out. The most depressing thing is to go work out once, to be super sore the next day, and to realize that it changed nothing in your body at all. It's still miserable. And it takes weeks of consistency and months and even years of life change to develop these habits and that strength and that growth. Well, it's the same thing in this, that this isn't, it's a slow and steady process he talks about. So that was something that stuck out to me. What about you guys?
There was something, I know Brandon just went off mute, so I want to get it in before he does, because he always seems to take mine. It was, he said, we cannot live beyond it's on page 55, by the way. We cannot live beyond the identity we have embraced. I am a sinner saved by grace is a death sentence.
Okay,
what?
Go. No, go. Keep talking.
So, what I thought was interesting, and John, you probably disagree with this, and what I wanted to say was this references back to the last book that we wrote, that we read. I don't remember exactly what the guy was saying that we should think of ourselves. It's like self-righteous or
righteous, right? We should see ourselves as righteous, as God sees us as righteous.
So I almost feel like that's clearing up maybe what the author in the last book was trying to say, that by just seeing yourself as a sinner that's saved by grace and that's it, is, I guess, not giving yourself the right mindset as to who you should become and who you should focus on being, rather than saying, oh, I'm just a sinner. Yeah, that's clear. We're all sinners, but what else, you know?
Right. Yeah. And yes. Yeah. He said, like you said, Brian, he said we are saints and that we should see ourselves as saints. Again, to restate simply what I said in the last book too, I disagree with how they come to it. We're coming to the same point. All right. We're both starting on opposite sides. We're coming to the same point. He wants us to go through life seeing ourselves as saints and as righteous, almost as if and this isn't the phrasing he used, but like manifesting it, right? That if you believe it and if you say it, then it will become your reality. When for me, and Judah knows this, I've taught this for years and years, that's the opposite of what I want. I want to come, and the reason is because I think it can potentially lead to pride, and lead to arrogance, spiritual arrogance. I want to come at it from the side of I am a sinner saved by grace, therefore fill in the blank, right? It's Romans 12, 1 and 2. That it's because of what Christ did on the cross for us that I see myself and I give myself as an act of spiritual worship, Romans 12, 1, for that. So we're both coming at the same point. If I just sit, and I understand what he's saying is if I sit on the fact that I'm a sinner, and what I wrote was that if you get stuck on the fact that you're a sinner, that it can ultimately lead to guilt, and it can lead to shame, and it can lead to you never believing that God can do more with you than just save you because you're worthless. That is not, and I've had conversations even on stream with people. That is not what Scripture tells us at all. And so in the same way that, to me, to see ourselves as righteous can lead to pride, seeing ourselves as a sinner saved by grace, if we're stuck at the beginning part of that, then you're in the same boat then you see yourself as worthless and useless. Man, that's a sin just the same. God didn't save you to be worthless and to be useless. He didn't stop with salvation. He keeps moving, and there's so much more he wants to do. So, yeah, I'm glad you caught that part. And I don't think it necessarily matters what side you come on. Just be aware of the faults of the side that you come on, so that you're aware if you're leaning on the bad side of it. So, yeah. That's okay. That's the short. Thanks, Corey. I was going to ignore that one, but thanks. I appreciate it. God, man.
Well, I saw that.
I wrote
was
a
like,
big question mark in it, man. I underlined almost. There's a couple of moments in this book I wrote next to it, so I appreciate it. All right, Brandon.
I don't have anything
Corey's
to add.
Okay, good.
John, you took my first point, and Corey, you took my second one. So I don't know.
That's why I had to get him before.
Good. I'm so glad.
Literally
I'm
took
so
both
glad.
the ones I was looking at.
That's good. That's good. Ryan, you got anything?
No, I mean, I don't really have anything from this chapter that really stuck out, other than what you guys kind of already mentioned.
Okay, so
only
here's
thing that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say the only thing that it's something that just kind of stuck to me is the, I don't know what page it is because I have the ebook and you guys have the physical books. It says for you guys, but it's on the "You Are a Masterpiece." It was saying there's one part where it says, "The other part of me, the true man, was asking for attention and care. He knew, or at least hoped, that there was another path. I chose to open my heart for the first time to the possibility that God had a better story, a way for my soul to be whole again, a place where I might find a real rest, a place to crash from my exhaustion, a place of still waters to restore my weary soul." And in the very next paragraph is a one-sentence paragraph, and it just says, "And then I met Lindsay," which I'm assuming is his wife. And he's talking about he was like living for himself and doing things, his own way or whatever. And it's not related to really what we've been talking about so far, but that kind of spoke to me just because I've seen that a lot in my own life where, as soon as you stop and like commit yourself, like you're chasing after these things, right? But as soon as you stop chasing after those things and commit yourself to chasing after God, like it's funny how often that you end up getting the very thing that you didn't know you needed, but you needed, right? So it's just a cool little thing that I, saw on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Draw
I
from my
totally
own.
agree. I totally agree. I think we all have stories because it doesn't even have to be a full life where you spent 10 years, running after money and all this sort of, power and authority in business or things like that, that it can be, man, on a day-to-day basis. There's times where I just run for myself and the things that I want to achieve in that day instead of doing what I feel like God's leading me to do or what's, asking God to lead my directions. And so I think it's a day-to-day thing as much as it is a big thing. Yeah. And so one of the things about, I got two things before we move on to the next chapter. Page 56, in the second paragraph, he says, it's what you do every day, in and out, every moment, that reveals what you really believe about reality. And what I wrote next to it was, the things we do reveals what we believe about ourselves. And I think it's this, if you're trying to assess where you are as a man and where you are kind of in this process of growth and spiritual growth and kind of trying to let God lead you, I think that the challenge is, or one of the assessments is to look at what you do, because it reveals what you believe about yourself. Are you seeking validation? Are you seeking approval? Are you seeking money and respect? Or are you seeking after God? And are you looking to serve others first, even at the cost of yourself? And I think that you can look at what you do, and it in part determines, it'll show you some things of what you believe. But okay, I do have a question before we move on to the next thing. So how have you guys become new over the years as a person? So one of the things, and I don't remember where this was, but that's kind of towards the end of the chapter, he talked about that our strength is Christ, and that it's not our question, which is validation, worth, all those different things that we've talked about, but that to become our name, to become who we ultimately need to become, we need to focus on our strength, which is Christ, not our question to the world. And so how have you guys at points in your life become new, kind of that new creation that 1 Corinthians talks about? What are things that you've done in your life to feel like you've been someone who's chasing after God? Does that make sense? That question makes sense?
The only thing I can think of is just moments when I become intentional about my relationship with God. I think it's so easy not to be intentional and to either be passive about it and just hit or miss, or do it when you have time, type of thing. But yeah, when those months or weeks sometimes where I'm very intentional about it, that's absolutely when I feel like I have a clear understanding of who I am and my position with Christ, and just in general, the closeness is much stronger.
That's good. Yeah, Brian, I think that's something that a lot of people do, right? They chase the corner office in the high-rise building because it's a practical and like something that we can hold on to. It's something we can see, something we can achieve, that's easy to chase after. What about you, Ryan or Corey?
Kind of like what Brandon said, just being intentional about it. But it's, for me, I mean, in a more literal or practical sense, there's a book called Atomic Habits. There's like a business book, but it's all talking about, building good habits and how you build good habits for work and for life. But it talks about setting yourself up to complete those, to instill those habits. Like one of the things that it talked about was taking your phone and setting it in another room and then going to bed. So first thing in the morning, you don't immediately just look at your phone first thing. You get up and you actually get ready for the day. So I think sometimes I feel like that's when I'm, providing a way for myself to get more focused on God, is setting myself up for those good habits.
That's good. I think it's really good and really practical. And Brian and Azrael, Judah, you can give something too that was really, it's a really practical thing that you guys do to become new, to stay close to God in your relationship, which I think will play in part of what it means to be a man in this next chapter. But what about you, Corey?
Uh, I'm pretty sure I understand the question, but well, I guess what's good for me is, I guess whenever this might sound silly, uh, the time that I dedicate to my son, right? When I let him see me reading this book that we're going through, when I let him see me reading the Bible, whenever we're doing our prayers, my wife calls it essentially dying to yourself every day, because you die to yourself to serve him. I mean, as a parent, obviously.
Right.
And just all of that kind of putting it in perspective on letting him see my relationship with God. Uh, I guess what I'm trying to say is making my being the best dad that I can be and letting him see all the stuff that we're doing is, I guess, the steps that I've been taking that have kind of helped me out.
Oh, that's really good, man. I can remember that we didn't sit down and do like family quiet time stuff in my house, but I knew that my dad, because I woke up early enough some days, that my dad, before we ever got up, was on the couch or on the chair in the morning reading his Bible. That's just what he did. And I've tried to do the same thing. I'm not super consistent with it, but to do that as well, to be reading my Bible in front of my kids, to let them know that it's important, because what you're doing is you're setting an example on something that you value to your son. And even though he's little and doesn't understand it yet, it absolutely sticks with him, especially as he gets older, to know, no, this is dad. This is important to dad. So that's really good. That's really good. Okay. All right. Chapter 5,
Oh, boy.
the fiery chapter. Your first, before I got all heated and started sending text messages last night, what was your first reaction to it? Was it, and Brandon, I really want to hear, because I really appreciated what you said in the text message thread, but how did it make you feel kind of first? That's good, Judah. That's really good. How did chapter 5 make you feel?
Yeah. For me, there was several things that made me feel. One of those being guilt, that I'm not I don't contain the masculine qualities that he outlines in that chapter. And that I'm not instilling that in my boys. Like, it makes me feel like I need to. Whether that's things like getting them outside, going hiking or fishing or hunting or whatever it is, but those, masculine things that you consider as being a manly man and all that. And that was one of my initial things, was partly guilt, but then kind of confusion too. Because for me, so we vacation in Colorado with my wife's family, Natalie's family, almost every year. And I love the mountains personally, and I feel more, I mean, it's probably vacation, so I feel more at peace on vacation at times. But in general, like, I like to get up early in the mornings, see the sunrise. Like, I just feel like my soul feels more at peace when I'm up there. And I feel, I don't know, it's weird, but I mean, I feel more connected to God while I'm there. It's just a more conducive environment for me to be in that space. But yeah, reading through this chapter, it makes me feel like that's the only way that you can get there, is that you do these masculine things and these things that we consider being a manly man. And I don't know, I was just really conflicted on how to feel on that chapter.
No, and I think that was, and I mean, if Corey or Ryan, if you want to add something, you can. But I think that ultimately that was the goal. So the chapter's titled "Becoming a Generalist," and I do want to ask y'all this question: is he talked about that the value of that a good man. All right, so let me say that a good man is a generalist, not a specialist, and that by becoming specialist, that we've lost a sense of our manhood. So, general question: I'm not asking you if you agree with the statement or not. Do you feel like in today's society that men are more specialists or more generalist. A specialist would mean that they do certain things really well and they don't have they don't do some things at all. Generalist would be, you know, what is it, the jack of all trades, but skill of none, or great at none kind of thing. You can do lots of things. You can't do any of them like at a professional level, but you know how to do lots of things. So how do you guys maybe feel you are? And do you see that in society? Do you see that in men around you?
So, I mean, I had one quick point, and I know I just talked, but I had one quick thing on that one. And I think that as a society, I think just in general with most topics, men want to be the experts of whatever topic or category that is. It's just, we feel like we need to be the expert at something. And I think in doing that, sometimes we miss needing to be good at other things and not just a singular expert at 1, 2, or 3 things. It's impossible to be an expert on everything. So if you try to be an expert, you're going to be very limited on what you can actually be an expert on. And when you go down that road, then I think you lose some of those generalist qualities that you still need to sustain your family.
That's good. What about you other guys?
So at a company I used to work for, little startup web agency, we had a term that we would call it T-shaped. And what we meant by being T-shaped, and one of their employees to be T-shaped, and what they meant is we want you to know enough about a lot of things, so widen your T, but we want you to be subject matter expert in one thing. Like in the thing that is your role, be an expert in, but have general knowledge of a lot of things. I think to answer your point more, or your question more directly, I think that the world is, or society is, more specialist than generalist. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I know this chapter really hits it hard that that's a really bad thing and that we should all be generalists. I kind of just flat out disagree with that point. And we can talk about that more in a second, but that's kind of how I view myself, is T-shaped. I know a lot of things, got a lot of hobbies, got a lot of interests and random, stuff that I know. I'm generalist in a lot of stuff, but I am a specialist in what is my, my role in my companies and all that kind of stuff like this. So I'll stop there and we can pick up that.
Can I keep going? Okay, good. No, that's good. What about you, Corey?
I don't know. I kind of agree with everybody. I don't know if we're actually more specialized than anything. I think maybe we're more generalized just because of where technology is. I mean, it's a stupid example, but what about was that Blue Apron? People are now cooking their own meals more. You can go on YouTube, learn how to fix a car. You can go on you can go on YouTube and literally learn anything. So if we're talking about generalization, I feel like because of technology, we're more generalized than ever before. Whereas maybe way back in the day, when you went to a shop, like if I worked at a shop, I'm only going to work at a shop for the rest of my life. Whereas, what I do now, I might leave my company, go work for a different company, do something completely different because I can learn how to do it really quick. So I don't know.
That's good. No, y'all have actually made me question my own answer. That's good. So I would say that I think in general, society pushes us to be specialists. I think we see it even down in kids, right? That, in our school district, that they want you to choose a career path in junior high that you're interested in, and then they give you classes in a direction towards that career path all through high school. Now, I wanted to be a professional soccer player and an engineer like my dad in junior high. I'm neither one of those things at all. But that's what I would have wanted back then. And I think that we see it in sports, right? The kids' sports, that you can't play multiple sports at a high level because of the commitment they require. You can't do multiple, the
It's
number of
discouraged
kids.
to play multiple sports.
It's discouraged.
With kids usually.
You can't do it in high school band. You can't do, it's very, very difficult and frowned upon to be anything but a specialist as a in so many things in society, that I think that yes, the downside of that is that we have to put in some work to be a generalist, and I do think there is value in being a generalist. You know, Ryan, you said it right, that yeah, you're a specialist, and Brian, what you said, the Holy Spirit gifts us specifically to fit the body in a special way. We are not all on this thing or in this group here pastors. That's what God's called me to do, and in the same way, God's called you to each do your own thing and in your own way, and He's gifted you and talent and given you talents in that area. So I think that we do need to be specialists in certain areas, but there's a value in being a generalist as well. And I think that if I'm going to take the good of this chapter, I do think that that is something that he says that is good is that we do need to be, there's value in being generalist. And I guess one quick story before we move on is I can remember when we had a hailstorm here in 2016, and it blew out all of our windows and just destroyed so much of our house. And we wanted to do things to fix up the house. And so I decided to buy tools. All right. I literally owned nothing. I've been married for almost 10 years, and I had a drill that I didn't know where the battery was, and nothing else. And so I bought some tools with some insurance money we had, and I started to learn, and I kind of grew this passion and this enjoyment out of it. And it was really fun to kind of become a generalist, which helped me to be prepared for some other things. So now, let's get into it. The whole point of this chapter, though, is to talk about what it means to be a man. And I think that he said some things that were good. But the thing that he said and I think that Brandon kind of hit at this earlier. He's talking about a story where his kids needed something, and they were over at a friend's house, and one of them said, "Hey, we need a knife." And his daughter came up to him. It's on page 72. And his 6-year-old daughter came to him and smiled and said, "My daddy always has a knife." And then he says in here, and I underline this, they asked for a knife, but what they really wanted was a man, a father. And I just was like, rolled my eyes to go, oh gosh, no, I can't. And I think ultimately the issue with this chapter for me, and we'll talk about this, is I think he confuses practical manhood and biblical manhood. Because to me, there's a huge difference in practically what it means and what it looks like to be a man and good things to do as a part of that. But those are all optional things. What it means to be a man is what God ultimately has defined as that, and the things that he has set as part of that. So how did you guys feel with some of that, that challenge of practical versus biblical manhood? And then we'll kind of get into some specifics about it.
I mean, I was in the same boat. I feel like it was taken to the extreme in the way that he described it. I think one of the other analogies was the IKEA furniture, where he was kind of bashing the fact that it's, almost paint by numbers. It's super simple. They even give you little Allen keys and stuff. Like, you don't even need tools to do it anymore, and kind of bashing the fact that our society is in a place where we need that. I don't know. It's kind of taken a little bit to the extreme, I think, in a lot of those practical ideas.
Yeah, I guess I got kind of confused when I was reading this book, that it was just more like, this is how you become a man. I'm like, I'm pretty comfortable with what I am as a man, but like, tell me, like, biblically, like.
Yeah. I think one of the areas go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say there's a concept that my church talks about a lot, and most of the time when they talk about it, they speak to it. Well, not most, I guess. They speak to it in a lot of different ways, sometimes like in the medical sense, but they talk about this term called common grace. And what they define common grace as is it's grace given to all. So there's, grace given specifically to believers in Christ. And then there's grace that's expanded to all, common grace. So things like, medicine, technology, these are common graces that we are all afforded. And when he made several references to technology, being something that is fighting directly against masculinity. And me being who I am, and I own tech companies, like
Right.
that's what I do for. Like, that's my world. I definitely like kind of took offense to that. I was like, yes, but like also it is helping us to become, you know, better fathers, better husband. Like there's the benefit side of it too, right? Like what Corey was saying, like what you said, Corey, with the HelloFresh and all those, you can make your meals easier and stuff like all that. I would argue that the author would probably say, like the IKEA thing, but it's too easy. You don't have to go kill the stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Bring it
Right.
home.
Right. Right.
It's
You
too
can't
easy.
use a
It's going to
cookbook.
the store.
You can't use a cookbook. You got to
Sure,
cook. You got to cook based on what God is just put
You
in
mean
your heart.
somebody shipped your meat to you? You didn't go out in the backyard and kill it? I don't.
Yeah.
Well, he talks about
What we're saying-
like getting his whole family to field dress the elk or
Oh
something.
my gosh! Yeah, I
Right.
gotta agree. I gotta tell you, I
It was very much
I
an
didn't even finish this chapter. I couldn't finish it. I couldn't.
Like
I
you
couldn't
guys
finish
said, there was a lot of things like I don't do that, or that is not like a character trait of mine currently. I'm not chopping wood. I'm not field dressing deer. I'm not hunting. I don't own a gun. Like, it's just not who I am. And then there's also a part of me that's like, I don't even really have a desire to do any of that, you know? And so I was like, what does that say about me, according to you, the author? Like, not only am I not masculine, but I have no desire to be masculine. It was really hard the way that he drew such a hard line there. Like you are either masculine or you're not, and this is how you are masculine.
Mm-hmm. And I think that his examples were, that you should know how to fix a car. You should carry a knife. You should know how to survive on your own. It's the things that we would say are traditional masculine things. And again, the statement I made earlier was, I think he started to merge the ideas of practical manhood and biblical manhood, because he said a lot of good things in here too. But it got muddied up with this idea that no, but you can't become a man unless you spend time out in the woods with your kids, learning how to survive on your own, like the Boy Scouts. Man, I have no desire to be in the woods. My idea of camping is a hotel with air conditioning. Like I don't like bugs. I don't want to deal with that, right? And so let's talk about it. What do you guys feel like is a biblical? Is this fair to ask y'all, or do I just jump into this? What do you guys feel like are some biblical things that God calls men, that God puts on men, if that makes sense?
No, yeah, it makes total sense. And as I was thinking about it, I was thinking about that exact thing. It's like, I think there's character traits, there's qualities that God calls men to have. Like there's leadership, there's empathy, caring for others, protecting others. Like there are things that we as men should be doing. But yeah, I see him more as that kind of stuff. Like the fact that I know how to fix a car or I cut my own grass, like I don't necessarily think that that's what makes me a godly man or a biblical man. I think taking leadership and, providing for my family, or I'm not cutting the grass, I have somebody cut my grass, but I'm making sure that it gets done, like that kind of stuff. Like, I think that is what I'm definitely called to do as a man.
That's good. What about you, Brandon?
Yeah.
Corey?
No, I completely agree. I think one of the most important things of being a biblical man is being somebody who can lead his family well towards Christ and show the example of what that looks like. I think we're charged with that, to be, the spiritual leader of our household, and not in like a dictator type of way, but more of showing them the example that they should be, following alongside, and giving him a glimpse of what that looks like. I think that's one of the important aspects of being a biblical man to me.
That's good. What about you, Corey?
Yeah, I don't know if I can add anything to that other than, leadership. That's how I feel, that is the most important thing. I was kind of hoping that somebody could try to dissect this and bring this back biblically, like John, somebody. There
Gotcha, I
has
gotcha,
to
I
be.
gotcha.
It cannot be that he's just throwing this out there like, yeah, we're gonna talk about God, but before we do all that, this is what it takes to be a man. Like there has to be a reason why he's putting this in there.
Yeah, well, I think he's putting it in there because he goes back to and what he said at the very beginning of the chapter, which I did mark, was give me a second, let me find it. He says one of the greatest unspoken tragedies of our time is the atrophy of what it means to be a man. That we've lost it, that has shrunk, and that ultimately I don't disagree with that statement. I just disagree with how he comes to the answer of it. And so I want to read, and let me find it. Actually, if someone else will find it for just a second. It's 1 Corinthians. Where is it? Sorry, I should have this one ready. I'm trying to find it.
16, 13 through 14.
Yeah, that one. Okay,
We're
so
all on the same page.
1 Corinthians
Yeah,
16,
71.
13 through 14, which is the verse he uses, and ultimately one of the verses I think that gives us direction, right? So this is Paul writing to the church in Corinth, and he says in chapter 16, he says, be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong, let all that you do be done in love. And so we're not going to go through this full spiritual breakdown, like through a full expository of this. If anybody wants me to, let me know in the chat, and I will start off next week's going through this section of scripture right here. I will tell you and encourage, if you use the command act like men that was in the description of the thing, it will lead you to a really good sermon series by Joby Martin that walks through this, that's from his church, that he talks about. I mean, Joby is the man's man that this guy, that Morgan Snyder, the author of our book, would look up to, right? He wears flannel, drives a big truck, shoots guns, hunts, drinks beer. Like he's the man's man, right? He has a country accent. Like he just is the kind of guy you would feel safe around. And Joby, at the very beginning of the 6-week series, talking about what it means to be a man, because if you look at me and you think that I'm a man because of that, you are dead wrong. That there can be a guy at Starbucks in skinny jeans, drinking a latte, with an electric car, who's just as much of a man as I am, because it doesn't have to do with anything that we do or we achieve. It has to do with our heart for the Lord. And so really with this verse, again, it says, be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, and be strong. And so what does it mean to act like men? If we go back to the very, very beginning, right? When God created Adam, he said that he created him in his own image. In chapter 1, Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. And then it goes on in verse 2, and it gives what he tasked Adam with. And what he tasked Adam with is he took him out of the wilderness and he put him into the garden. And he said, I want you to cultivate this land. I want you to work for this land. And so there's not that we have to do a certain kind of work, is that he wants that there's a value of working. A value of working hard, of not being passive, but to be active with our hands doing something. And that may be something technology, that may be something physical, that may be something with your family, playing with your kids, but that we need to be active as men and that we can't just sit by. I think another thing that we see is that men are called to be leaders. That I'm going through premarital counseling with a couple right now. And one of the things we talk about is that the responsibility that God puts on the man in a marriage is that he is the leader. And it doesn't mean that he leads out of, and again, we talked about this last week, it doesn't mean that he leads out of control and an authoritarian or a dictator type of leadership, but that he leads out of love, but that understand that God is going to hold him responsible. God punished Adam in the fall because of his passivity, because not because he took, not just because he took and ate of the fruit, but also because he was standing right next to Eve when she did it. He didn't stand up in that moment and lead as he's called to lead, as God put on him. Therefore, he failed. And so I think that leadership is one. I think that to work and to work hard is one. To be a protector, that God ultimately puts on us as men a responsibility to protect those around us. And that doesn't just mean, again, I don't have a concealed carry. Like I don't do that. But what it means is that I'm going to stand in front of not just my family, but I'm going to stand in front of the widow. I'm going to stand in front of the orphan. I'm going to stand in front of those who are being oppressed. That I have a heart for the people that can't protect themselves. Therefore, God says, I need you to protect them. I need you to stand up and to care for those who can't care for themselves. You've got a family, man. Something that breaks our heart in churches is when we see a family member, an older family member who's struggling physically towards the end of their life, and their kids, especially their sons, are doing nothing. That they are just leaving the church to handle all of it. And that is not the church's responsibility. That's the kid's responsibility. That's the son's responsibility, is to care and to provide and to protect your family. And that just doesn't mean your kids and your wife. It also means the people around you. And so that they stand up and that they protect those who can't protect themselves, that they're providers. And I don't think it's just financially, for the first, let's see, I've been married 15 years this year. And this year is the first time I've ever made more money than my wife. My wife has always made more money than me, except for the couple of years she didn't work. That's the only reason I made more than her. But my wife has always made more money than me. And you know what? And that's okay. It doesn't mean that I have to make the most money. What it means is that I'm making sure that my family is provided for. That when we had our twin girls, my wife felt called to stay home and to raise those girls. Not every wife does, but my wife felt like that was what she really wanted to do. That's what God called her to do. Cool. Then my job is to figure out how to provide for our family so that she can fulfill that desire that God's put on her heart. And so, yeah, it meant like I didn't suddenly go from making $35,000 a year at a church to $85,000. I went from 35 to 45. That's when I joined Dealertrack right there. But what it meant is that I was going to do what I needed to do, and I worked odd jobs outside of that, and I did other things so that I could make sure that my family was provided for, that I'm making sure that our budget is sound enough that we're not putting ourselves in a hole, that I'm making sure that as a family, we're provided for. And then ultimately, my job is to love well. And all of these things are encompassed by how I love and how I serve the people around me. That as a man, God's call on my life isn't to go work my butt off 80 hours a week and make a bunch of money so I can provide for my family. My job is to love my family well. And sometimes that means sacrificing certain goals and certain things like that corner office like you talked about, Brian. Sometimes it doesn't mean to sacrifice that, but sometimes it does mean to sacrifice those things because I need to be with my kids. I need to coach my kids' baseball team. Or, you know what, I just need to be home with my family 3 nights a week just to do dinner. And I need to turn off work. I need to turn off everything else to do that. Maybe, for those who aren't married, it is, it's man, on dates that you are treating that girl with the most incredible respect as if they were the person that you were marrying in that moment. Like, what kind of respect and honor do you show them? In this premarital counseling, the 3 things that we tell them when we tell husbands is that God has called you to lead, God's called you to love, and God's called you to honor. And that ultimately, I think that all the things follow in with that. That is biblical manhood, okay? And you'll notice in none of that does it say that you have to make the most money, that you have to know how to go out and hunt to protect your family from that snake that shows up on your back patio, right? And none of that does it say that you have to know how to change a toilet or change the oil in your own car. But that's biblical manhood. Okay, agree, disagree? Challenges? What do you guys feel like to those things?
I agree with all that. I think, yeah. I think, like you were saying, our responsibility is to, just like Adam in the garden, his responsibility was to care and protect and watch over everything in the garden, and that includes everything. And I think that's what we're called to do, is to care for our families, the people that God has put underneath us and put alongside us. It's our responsibility to care for those people. and to watch over them, protect them, and not be passive. I think that is a problem with today's society, is that men do have a easier opportunity to become passive than they have in the past, I think. So not to be that, like you're saying, Adam, you know, with the fruit and the tree, just letting you, you know, take a bite of the fruit and not being available and stepping in right there. So I think that's a couple of things that we're charged with.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think even kind of like what you're saying with Krista, like she felt called by God to stay home with the girls, and that's what y'all did. I feel like that act right there, like that is also what we need to do as men. Like we need to show our family, our kids, that we are talking to God, that we are listening to what God is telling us, and then we are actively choosing to do what God is calling us to do, whether, you know, whatever that is. I mean, there's probably seasons in people's lives where the wife is working and the man is staying at home, but like that's what they've been called to do at that time. Like I feel like that's not a negative thing, as long as you are doing that act of listening to God, hearing what he's actually calling you to do, and you know, obeying that calling to do that. Like that is how we are leading our families well, and being biblical men.
Corey, you want to add anything to it?
I don't know what else I can add to that. I agree with
This is why
you
we
guys.
gotta let, let you talk
100%.
first.
So all I'm trying to do is get in this guy's mindset as to why he's telling us this. And the only thing I can really think of is he's always referencing, you know, how he put Adam in charge of the kingdom that was his. He was supposed to maintain it. He's supposed to reign over it, like all that, and that we're supposed to try and get back to that person that God initially created Adam for. And then I guess he's trying to make it more modern. Like, I mean, Adam obviously wasn't mowing the lawn and he wasn't fixing plumbing, but that, I guess those are things that we do in order to maintain our kingdom and lead our kingdom, I guess. Again, I'm just trying to get in this guy's
no,
mindset.
and this is and this is good, because I think that's the exact kind of transition we needed. Is okay, so how do we then do these things, right? To lead, to protect, to love, to serve, to provide. How do we do those things? Again, I said from the very beginning, I think his issue is that he takes what are so we talk in faith about primary and secondary things, okay? So from a faith perspective, there are things that we would say are primary things that you believe that Jesus is God's son, right? So this is salvation. You believe that Jesus is God's son, and that because of sin, right, that we're all sinners, that because of sin that we're separated from God, but that God loved us so much that he sent his son to die for us, and that Jesus came and he lived a perfect, sinless life. He died on the cross, was resurrected 3 days later, and that if we put our faith in him, that we can be saved. Okay, so those are primary things. All right. If we agree on those things, then we're believers. Now, there's also secondary things, and these secondary things are things that we can disagree on and still all be believers, but it's how we live out the life that God has called us to live, which is to love God and love others. And so how do we do that? Well, some general differences might be, well, does your church believe that music can be played with instruments, or does it need to be a cappella, right? Or does your church believe in a congregational authority or an elder authority? Does your church believe in speaking in tongues or not? Does your church believe in more of a reformed theology that God has called those, and that it's only those, or does it believe more of what we call like an Arminian theology, which is a free will theology? All these things are secondary things. We can disagree on all of these things because there's not complete clarity. God has given some freedom in these things. And what I feel like he's done is he's talked about primary things in here. And he has. He's talked about that to be a man is to love and to serve and to protect and to provide.
Yeah.
But then he's made secondary things fix a toilet. The sentence that I underwrite and that I underlined, which just said the whole thing to me. And let me find it real quick. Is he says a man needs to know how to fix a toilet, manage a budget, and care for the heart of a woman. Okay, fix a toilet. No, that is not a necessity. Manage a budget. Okay, that's a maybe to me. Care for the heart of a woman? Absolutely. That is a godly responsibility for us to have as men. So he takes three things that are on a full scale and he says, a man needs to know all of these things. No, that's like
Yeah.
practical versus biblical. So
Yeah,
let's
there's a
talk
lot
practical.
of places that don't even have toilets, so he's like alienating at least millions of men that
Right.
don't have access to a toilet
Right.
to fix. Like,
One of the lines that along that same thread that stuck out to me was on 71 when he says a man who basically was telling you who you should become, and he's saying basically you should become a man who has not outsourced his world and his masculinity to hired hands. Now I get the sentiment of what he's trying to say. I think some of that does go into that passivity and not just allowing everybody to do everything for you, which there's some validity to that. I think you need to take responsibility for certain things that are deemed things you should have responsibility for, but he definitely digs into that a lot deeper than necessary about not outsourcing to hired hands, saying, don't have somebody just come cut your grass for you. Don't pay them. Like, at least learn how to do it, and then you can
Right.
pay somebody to do it. I don't know about that, but
Okay, so let's talk about this because I think that we've talked about biblical. All right, so biblical or God-directed goals. And Brian, that's such a good way to say. I've never heard that before. In core things, unity, and the secondary things, liberty, which means we have options. We can have disagreements, and in all things, agape, which is this love, this unconditional, selfish love, selfless love. So one of the things I wrote was biblical things are God-directed goals, right? To love, to serve, to protect, to provide. No matter who we are as men, that's what we're called to do by God. Practical things are not necessary, but helpful, but very helpful. So here's a question. What are some practical things in your life that you feel like allows you to achieve those things better? Okay. And let me just say right off the bat, if you don't do any of these things that we talk about here, that's okay. But I do believe that there is value in practical things. And to go back to my example, when the hailstorm hit, our windows were blown out of the car. And I can remember in that moment being in a state of shock and not knowing what to do. And we called up my dad and my father-in-law, and they came over and they immediately got to work. And I could remember afterwards feeling like a failure, and not in a failure that I didn't know the right kind of drywall or the right kind of tape or the right kind of plywood to use. I felt as a failure because I didn't know how to protect my family in that moment. Okay, so there's the biblical side of it. So what I decided from that moment on was that I was going to be prepared. And so I started to learn general things and general skills. And what I found was I actually really enjoyed it. I had never worked on cars. I had never done anything other than hanging pictures in a house. And as I started to learn more skills, I began to enjoy it and felt this growing sense of manhood in me, and that I felt more like a man as I learned different things. But ultimately, it isn't the things that I learned that made me a man. It's that I was able to then provide and protect for my family better. Does that make sense? So that's ultimately with this, as we give examples of what practical things we do that makes us feel like men, or the things that we've learned that has been valuable in that, that's the kind of direction I want to take it is. I think it's important to have practical things, but it's important to understand that these practical things are not the goal. It's the goal to do the things that God's directed us to do. Okay, there.
I think
So-
along with what you were saying real quick, sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but
Jump in it.
This is why I gotta keep you muted.
what you were saying though, but I think it's important you may not necessarily have to know the skills of how to, fix your roof or your car windows or whatever, but I think it's important for the man to take the responsibility of getting it done, whatever that is, and whatever that looks like, whether that's calling an expert and having them do that for you. Like, don't sit around and just, wait for your wife to do it for you. Like, it's part of your responsibility in that protection side is to know you take responsibility. What needs to happen, take responsibility, make the call you need to make, whatever, call somebody, call an expert, call a friend, learn how to do it. It's kind of on you to take that lead position there.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I
Ryan,
think
go.
I would agree. And to expand on that last quote that you were talking about in the book, like you're talking about outsourcing stuff and how that's, you know, a negative thing or whatever, and that's fighting against your masculinity. I feel like outsourcing it is it's fine to outsource as long as it doesn't make you lazy. Is kind of where I frame that. Like outsourcing is not a bad thing. Asking for help is not a bad thing. That's a very good thing. That's a good and right thing that we need to teach our kids. Hey, if you have a problem, if you are struggling here, ask for help. That's great. Now, if you're doing it so that you don't have to fulfill any responsibilities and so that you can now become lazy, that's obviously a bad thing. So I feel like he just like he's right there, but he misses that whole like hit it home, you know, type of topic. But so to answer your question, John, in my life, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of asking for help when I need it. And I think some of the practical ways that I, you know, show that, or that I show what I believe a biblical man should be for my family is I mean, yeah, I know how to fix cars and I know how to do like random stuff, and that's all good and well. But I think the knowledge of knowing how to do that is secondary in importance to being able to provide, like Brandon was saying, and get it done, whether it's you or somebody else. Because I think, like, as I was reading this too, like another thing I kept bringing to my mind is community. And I feel like you try and do everything else, you know, everything yourself, then sure, maybe that's okay. But like, there's a real beauty in communities coming together and helping each other out where other people, you know, need help. Like I have neighbors who don't know how to work on their cars and they'll ask me, and you know, I'll help them out or give them advice or whatever. And like that's biblical community that we're doing. And it's not that they need to go figure out how to do it, and that's what they need to do. Like the fact that they're asking for help is showing their family that they're getting help where they need it. And you know, me on the other side, I'm showing my family that hey, I do have information or a skill or knowledge, and I can provide that to my neighbors. Like there's so much more depth than he gets to, I think, in these topics.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. And I think, you know, we, to give another example, I can remember when we were in college, and I don't remember if the both of y'all were with me or just one, but do you remember the time that we were driving back? It was late at night, it was dark, and we saw a car on the side of the road near DBU, right near 20, and it was on it was on Mountain Creek, I think, and it would turn out to be God, this is gonna sound. I think I was probably dating my wife at the time. Okay, so don't judge. But it was definitely girls in the car, right? But it's like late at night, it's a shady area, and we pulled over. Now, why in the world 3 dudes pulled over and got out of a car when there's a bunch of college girls or young adult women in a car outside of their car struggling? Like that's asking for a murder scene and to be shot with mace or something. But when we came there, they couldn't get their tire off, and we changed their tire. Do y'all remember this at all? Is this just some random story? Okay. One of the things that we took our high school guys through to talk about some practical things was we talked about just general things that are good to know. And like you said, Ryan, these are good things to know because it allows you to protect and provide for others, right? Is that we taught high school guys how to change a tire. Because, Brian, what you said, for those of us who didn't have a dad in our lives, I feel like we're behind in learning all these things and have to learn some of them later on in life. And that was one of the things that we realized as a youth pastor, was that some of these guys are not learning some of the basics from their dads about how to, in basics, take care of some things and to provide some basic skills that we feel like are going to help them to serve and to love others. Changing a tire, all right? A lot of fun with middle school boys and high school boys, making them think that tire gauge is Bluetooth and they just have to point it at the tire. It's not how it works. We taught them how to cook a meal. And what we did is for Valentine's Day, we had them invite their moms over and that they cooked the entire meal, all right? They had help. We had moms who were helping them, but they cooked a meal for their mom and they had to sit and they had to have conversation on what it looks like to have conversation with a woman, right? It was their mom, but loving conversation back and forth and do a dinner. It's a way to show love and a way to show care. And so for me, how I see these things carrying out now is I'm looking at the skills that I have, and I'm looking at the widows in my church. And something that God's put on my heart recently is, man, I need to get this community of people around me that are my age that have different skills, right? I can do a lot of tech things. I can hook up TVs and those kind of things. I got other guys that are really good at cars, other guys that are really good at lifting things. And I got other guys that are good on, fixing things in your house. And we need to go to our orphan or to our widows and our single moms and go, what do you need done? One of our senior adults needs our brakes changed on our car. Sweet. We got it. We're going to take care of it for you because we love and care for you. And so we're going to do that for you. And so I think that there's a value in learning practical things that are good. And so I guess the question is this: what's the most fun thing that you've learned that makes you feel like a man? What's the most fun thing you do that makes you feel like a man?
I don't, and maybe I should, but I don't know that there's like things that I do that specifically make me feel masculine, like a man.
Oh,
You know,
really?
I
Okay, I'm so the opposite.
I work out,
Yeah, me too.
like I work out, I feel stronger, but it's not like I work out and I'm like, I'm a man. I
Oh
just
my
lifted weight.
Okay,
That's not what I
okay,
feel like. It's not the action I have. I
okay.
feel stronger. I feel healthier. I feel like I'm taking care of my body, but I don't necessarily feel more of a man.
That's interesting. Okay. What about you, Corey?
Guns, building guns, shooting guns, cleaning guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, Ryan and I have zero desire in that. At
Yeah,
all.
I know, and I'm
Which is
not
good,
saying-
which is totally fine. But we have zero desire in that. But for you, that's something
Yeah.
that's cool for you and something that's fun for you, and that gives you that, if anybody's older than us or older, Brian, I know you'll get this right, that Tim the Toolman Taylor, that kind of thing of it that just makes you feel good. What about you, Brian? Is there anything, or are you like Ryan?
No, I mean, probably just the typical stuff like building things, changing an electrical outlet in my house, something like that. Like things that seem scary when you first start doing it, and then you realize, hey, I can actually do that. But I think some of that, what you were saying earlier about even teaching guys like the middle schoolers how to change a tire and stuff, I think what that's instilling in them is confidence that, hey, I can do something I didn't know how to do, and I figured out how to do it. And that just cooking a meal like that, I think that just builds confidence to be able to take on those responsibilities that we need to and be able to step up when we need to.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think that the confidence building and stuff is great. I struggle with but it makes me feel like more of a man.
Yeah.
It does provide me confidence. It provides me a lot of those things. But I'm teaching my daughter how to change a tire. I'm teaching her how to change her oil, but I'm not really teaching her how to be masculine. I'm just
Right.
skills, And so
Yeah.
that's where I rub with this chapter. And that's why when I do those things that you're talking about, Brandon, I feel proud of myself when I change an electrical outlet or I do something that's foreign to me.
Yeah, it's more along
Yeah.
the line of you feel like the sense of accomplishment that I was able to provide that for my family, and now we didn't have to expend money to have somebody do that. I was able to do that for us, and so more along that vein, then it's I was more of a showing my boys I'm more of a man because I went out and nailed some boards together. I
Right.
don't know.
Yeah. No, but I would say the thing that you just said, Brandon, is probably where I feel most like a man is when I'm fixing something in my house. And I think for me, a lot of it goes back to I didn't know how to do any of that. And so in this process of learning, what I've realized is I'm capable to provide for my family in a really cool, unique way. In that we need a toilet change. Cool. I go to YouTube and I research the heck out of it. I watch way too many videos, and then I just rip a toilet off. Listen, we're gonna figure it out, right? And it's not in the moment that I'm doing that I feel like a man. I think it's when I'm done that I feel like, sweet, I just did something that benefited my family. Boom! I feel in that moment I feel like a man. And while
You cared for your family.
yeah, and I think that's the root of it, right? So I probably agree with you, Ryan, but in those moments, I truly do, and this is probably where me and Corey are the same. I truly do feel like a man, like, and I think some of it too is that I feel like my dad and I feel like my granddad, and the two men that I look up to and that I want to be like when I grow up, right? Is that they were people that knew that they had skills, right? My granddad knew how to build furniture. That was something he did. He knew how to take care of us and how to fillet fish. When we go fish, he knew how to skin fish. I have no desire. I cut my finger on a knife as a kid and just bled like crazy, and I'm terrified of knives to this day, right? But I look at them, and what it was is they knew how to provide and protect for their family. So when I do things that accomplish that, it makes me go, oh yes, like this is what God's called me to do. Not the thing, but the thing. I know it's confusing.
Right.
Not the thing that I'm doing, but the thing that ultimately I'm accomplishing, which is providing and protecting for my family. So, okay. Let's we gotta move on.
Hold on, wait. I just got one thing that
Come on,
that
hurry up.
affected me,
Nope, no.
where I had a hard time sleeping, and I've actually thought about this all day
Oh,
today. And
come
I
on.
swear, if anybody can explain this to me, like, I'll be ecstatic. There's a line on page 70. I don't understand it. It says, "Remember, the outside of a horse is perhaps one of the very best things for the inside of a man." What does that
Okay,
mean?
so
Winston
I
Churchill, right?
About riding a horse
It's
or
a Winston
something.
Churchill quote.
yeah.
Oh,
I
is
think
it?
that
Yeah.
I didn't know it was a Winston
What does it
Churchill
mean?
quote, but
Like,
I
that's
think
cool,
it's
but
that
what does that mean?
that a horse is the picture of power and authority and skill and grace. And so the outside of the horse, you riding a horse, where is it? Because I didn't end up underlining it, but I know exactly what you're saying.
The beginning of chapter 5, it's like the quote underneath the title.
Oh, okay, it's that one too. Yeah. Something about the outside of a horse that is good for the inside of man. I think what he means by that is by riding a horse, by controlling that domain, right? That power and that authority that you get, and that feeling you get when you ride a horse, gives you that sense of manhood, right? That's ultimately what it is.
Okay.
So, okay, that's good. That's a good question.
It's a good point.
That's
Good
another-
point. Didn't
yeah,
think
yeah.
of it.
Okay, so let me just say a couple things.
Now
Right,
you
I
can think,
wrote,
Corey.
dude, I literally wrote my own book within a book on this thing, and so let me just say a couple things that I think are important. Satan's goal is to destroy the model, the biblical model of manhood. That can be with tweaking the goal or lowering the standard. Today's image of a man is not biblical, but was it biblical in the 20s or 30s? I think that's the challenge that I had with this chapter. Was it felt like he was trying to go back to, in the 20s and the 30s, right? The greatest generations, those were men. Well, there was a lot of abuse. There was a lot of neglecting a family. There was a lot of things at that time that were not manhood either. But I think the truth in that is that Satan's goal is to distort and to distract what God calls us to be as men. Okay, last thing, I promise. God, there's so much in this chapter, man. I could keep talking. All right. Strength isn't found in what we do, it's in who we trust. Strength isn't found in what we do, it's in who we trust. And it's this idea of Saul and David that in the Old Testament we see King Saul, who Israel wanted, who Israel begged and pleaded for Samuel to make king over Israel. God said, "I'm your king," and he knew that if they had a king in front of them, that they would be distracted and that they would ultimately look to that person for their salvation, not to God, and that it would not be good for them in any way, shape, or form. But they begged and they pleaded and they begged and they pleaded and said, "All right, this is what you want. I'm going to give it to you." So he gives them Saul. And Saul, in every possible way, looked like the king. He was tall, he was handsome, he was strong, he was a warrior, and yet he failed miserably, not because of what he could do, but because of who he trusted. He didn't trust God, he trusted himself. And then we see David, this boy, that gets anointed as a king, as a boy, because ultimately, what does he do? He trusts God. And in the fight with Goliath, he goes out there as a teenage kid, doesn't put on the armor, doesn't do anything. and he stands up and he's bold and he's courageous in front of this giant of a warrior that ultimately the entire nation of Israel is counting on David to win this battle. Otherwise, they are all enslaved to the Philistines. And this little teenage kid stands up to this giant of a man and stands before him and goes, "Who are you to mock our God? Who are you to mock the God and the creator of the universe? Who are you to have any say over this? I will knock you down, not because of me, but because of my God." And so get ready. And he does. And it's just a really cool thing. But okay, last thing. Here's what I wrote. What I want for my daughters to look for in a man. All right. And so this is for me. I do not care about their ability to cook, to fix a car, to fix a flat tire, or to mow a lawn. What I desire for my daughters to find in a man is someone who's passionate for God, who's a leader, who's kind, who's compassionate, who is servant-hearted, and who's a protector, who would sacrifice himself for his family, financially and physically. That's what I want my daughters to do. I can help this young man learn how to change a tire. I can help this young man learn how to balance a budget. I can help this guy do a lot of things that will help him protect and provide for his family. What I can't do for him is to create in him a desire for God, and create in him a desire to be a compassionate, servant-hearted husband to my daughters. That's all I want for my daughters, is to find somebody like that. So, okay. Man, we've been rolling on this chapter a long time. Chapter 6, becoming a warrior. Now, I did really like this chapter. There was one or two things that I was like, no on, but what did you guys feel like? What are some things that stuck out to you in this chapter?
I gotta be honest, I was a little exhausted from the chapter before. So
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand. Like I took a nap. I took a nap before I read this one, so I could keep going. But anything for you, Brandon or Corey? You want me to just say one or two things?
I'll just preach. One thing that I don't remember why I highlighted it, but I'm just going to read it and maybe it'll spark my memory. It says, the world, the flesh, and the evil one tempt us to settle for the smaller story, a narrow quest to arrange for the happy little life. And then yet something deeper in us knows that a life arranged only for a sense of comfort, security, and personal happiness is far too small to hold the expanse for which the masculine soul was designed to thrive. We must remember Peter's urging, be alert and sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of suffering. And I guess to speak to the heading of the title of the chapter, Becoming a Warrior, is just, I liked the verse that he used there as a very good representation of that. The enemy's there. He's waiting to devour us, and it's up to us to be the protector and to stand firm in the faith. I think I liked that.
That's good. And we'll talk about it in a minute. Some of Satan's strategies against us, but did anything else stick out to you guys?
One of the things I highlighted was on 91, kind of in the middle. And I'll just read it. It says, you're a soul made by God, made for God, and made to need God, not made to be self-sufficient. Our inherent neediness is the aspect of our lives that our false self resents most. It's also the environment that best allows our true self to live and grow, our utter dependence on the life of God. I think just a nice, healthy reminder that in today's society, I think someone who, like a man who feels like he needs something to make it, if you depend on something other than yourself, then you're kind of less than somebody that you should be. But I think just the reminder that no, we are supposed to be in a position where we have utter dependence on God, and that's a good and healthy thing. It's not because you're lacking in any area. It's because you recognize your needs and your position with him.
And I feel like that was a huge part of this chapter, which is why I enjoyed it. Was he just kept pushing back? It's something I underlined too. He kept pushing back to this idea that, just to repeat that quote, you're a soul made by God, made for God, and made to need God. You cannot succeed at becoming a king, becoming a man, without understanding that you need God, that it has to start there. Otherwise, you're going to get off track super quick and going to fail super quick. So, what about you, Corey? Anything stick out?
No, I think that was a good point.
There was one other thing that stuck out to
Yeah.
me that I just found. He was talking about in the one section of the chapter called combat breathing. He was talking about the SEALs, Navy SEALs, and combat breathing for them is where they control their breathing to a point that it lowers their heart rate and it keeps them more aware in difficult situations, stressful situations. And one of the things that he says there is, our enemy fears our rootedness in the present moment and the union with Jesus available here. He will do whatever it takes to keep our hearts pulled into either the past or the future to cut us off from the present moment. And I know one of the past streams we did, I talked about that depiction of like a water drop falling and then the ripples and then the reflection of the water drop, and how that symbol is supposed to be talking about staying in the present. And I just love the thought of that, is the enemy wants to keep you either in the past or worrying about the future. And our job is to stay right there in the present. And that whole combat breathing is, tying that into that is there's a lot of chaos that's happening or whatever is happening around you. Stay rooted in God, stay in the present moment, and let him be your peace. Let him be your comfort through that. And then with his comfort and peace, you can be ready and aware for any situation that might come up. I liked that little section there.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, that's really good. I definitely underlined a lot of that too. And I think this kind of goes on that there's a stronger man and king than the king whose heart is fully rooted in, established in, and united with the living God. We can mature in our true self only through union with God. And so then he talks a lot about how Satan's goal is to come along and to he has a strategy against me. And that's, and I won't get into it because we're already an hour and a half into the stream, but I don't totally have a little bit of an issue with how he talks about on page 98 that Jesus has given us full authority to conquer evil. I'm not totally sure about that. And ultimately what I wrote is, I feel like to me, it's more charismatic, like speak dominion over your struggles, speak dominion over the things that God has challenged you with, the debt in your life, or the sickness and the cancer, speak dominion over that God, I rebuke this in your name. Man, the reality is the Bible's full of it. I mean, the whole book of James is full of this idea that we are going to go through struggles and we're going to go through persecution. We're going to have challenging things. I prefer a trust in God to help you overcome these struggles. But when we talk about struggles, what are some strategies that you feel like Satan uses against you to knock you off this centered on God, this kind of warrior mentality that your focus and your strength is God and God alone? What does Satan do in your lives to kind of knock you off that path? And maybe just give me one. I mean, I know I sent you all the three of mine, but maybe just give me one.
If I was to give one, I think it's just what I was just talking about. It's knocking me out of the present. I mean, being my career what it is, like, future can be a very scary thing for me because it's so uncertain all the time. So I think that's the thing that Satan uses the most right now is hey, you need to worry about the future. Like, what happens if you lose a couple clients? What happens if a company doesn't take off like you think it's going to take off? Like, what happens? And then that spirals me into like, oh, I'm going to worry about everything now. But yeah, it's like making sure and being hyper focused on staying present moment and not thinking enough to plan and to be aware of where I'm headed and staying in the direction that I need to stay, but not getting sidetracked by worrying about the future, just staying in the present and looking 1-2 steps ahead of me and just following where that goes.
That's really good. That's really good. Corey, Brandon?
I think for me, it's the provider aspect of it. I think personally for me, I have a very natural tendency to compare against other people or, other people in my profession, my in the area that we live in, whatever it may be. But that's definitely, I think, a little old target that Satan has on myself of, hey, you think you're doing well, but you're not as good as this guy. Look at his stuff. You could always be doing better. That your family wants more from you. You're not providing enough. You need to do a little more. It's those little things, I think, that hit me.
That's good. Corey?
Procrastination.
God, that hit really close. I really don't appreciate that at all.
It's you've got a goal. I'm gonna get up. I'm gonna get up early. I'm gonna read my Bible. I'm gonna do this every day. And then you hit the snooze button, and you're like, oh man, all right, I'll just double up on what I was gonna read the next day, and then I'll get back on track, and then that snowballs, and then I'm just out of it.
That's good.
I just don't read my Bible anymore.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so mine, and again, I sent you all these, but just so that they're out there in the world, one of mine is this validation. They talked about a lot in this book, that I'm not good enough, and that people pleaser mentality, that whether it's even in my job now, that I'm not a good enough preacher, I'm not a good enough leader, that I'm always worrying about if people think I'm good enough, and then I focus on times when I'm not good enough. So that's on one. And then the second, which is kind of funny considering the first one, but that sometimes I settle into just being okay is good enough. Just being like, yeah, I'm doing okay. And that's good enough. And that I can fake a Christian life well enough to seem good on the outside. But the reality is, like, I am walking away from God. And it might be a slow walk, but I'm still moving away from God, not towards him. And so for me, sometimes Satan distracts me with, you're doing good enough. Yeah, you hadn't read your Bible for 3 days, but really you were in a Bible study this week. So, like, that's pretty good, right? Oh, you didn't read scripture, but you read this book. Oh, that's pretty good, right? So that's one of mine. And then, man, the one I didn't want to say, but I think he's hit me with recently, is his distractions disguised as rest. His resting in things outside of God, which just means that rather than doing things I know God's called me to do, whether that's sleep, whether that's be in his word, I'm doing things, whether that's Call of Duty, watching a movie, getting on social media, I'm doing things that I call rest, which I value and I think are good. In time, I'm doing them as a replacement for God things. And I think that's something. And then taking away focus time with my wife and my kids of, guys, I just need to sit here and rest, right? We talk about that we don't give our kids the best. We give work the best, and we come home and there's not much left. That's I think sometimes I do that as well. So, okay, sweet. Awesome. All right. Hour and a half in, man, this was a good discussion. We'll be back next week. Hopefully we don't have such strong challenges with the things of the book next week. But again, I really encourage you, if you're still with us or you're watching us back later, to check out the !Act Like Men. That is really, really good. It's a really good series by Joby Martin. 6 Sunday morning sermons, about 45 minutes each, on what it means to be a man of God. So until next week, as a part of that, we're going to play some Call of Duty. But until then, we will see y'all later. All right, so we are going to jump into some Call of Duty. Thank you guys. Brian, thank you for hanging out. Adam, thank you for hanging out. Hannah, if you're still here, thank you. In all those chats, no, I do not say cuss words most of the time. Sometimes, that's it, but most of the time. So, it's good. It's good. It's a good discussion night. Very good discussion. Okay, I'm gonna get some coffee because I'm tired, but I want to hang out and have some fun. So, you're welcome to hang out with us. Otherwise, I will be back in just a minute.